Opoku Gakpo, giving us the indication as to how the arrangement for the sitting would be, and it is, as you've seen in the chairs, some distancing between each of them or among each of them. And then for those members of Parliament who will not get seats in the chamber, they will get onto the gallery or would have the option of watching proceedings live from wherever, but specifically in their offices. And we also do know that a number of reactions will be generated, especially on both sides of the House, if not the minority side of the House. Joseph Opoku Gakpo is joining us on stream. He has with him a former Deputy Finance Minister, Member of Parliament as well, Cassiel Ato Forson. But Joseph, what do you have for us?
Well, from the indication we're getting now, the presentation may not begin until sometime around 12 o'clock. We are told that the Finance Minister is actually around. Actually, there's been a meeting of the majority caucus here in Parliament, virtually strategizing on how they would go about this, which, from what I'm told, there was input in that communication from the Finance Minister himself. And the indication is that he's just asking that a few minutes be spared him for him to cross his T's and dot his I's, as it would usually be put, so that then hopefully later by midday, it could be earlier, the whole processes could begin. Let's get quick comments from some MPs, even as we gather expectations. Cassiel Ato Forson is the MP for Jumako Enyanesian. He's former Deputy Finance Minister. Broadly, what's your expectation, even as the Finance Minister prepares to address it?
First, let me talk about the lateness and the fact that the address has delayed and is going to continue delaying for about 2 hours. From what I'm picking up, it looks like they are now rewriting the media review in the sense that the input is now coming from the politicians into the budget, obviously for election purposes. And that is saddening, but I'm shocked to my bones. You don't do that, Minister of Finance. You don't come to Parliament with your media review and then ask politicians or members of Parliament going to seek for re-election 4 months' time to put into your media review.
Those are politicians, so these are people in Parliament that you would
probably have gone to Cabinet, you have sat down with the technical team, and then you've done what you had to do. You cannot change your fiscal table within 2 hours, 30 minutes, and just come and announce things that are not in the fiscal table. You don't do that. But let me tell you something. I'm not surprised. What is going to happen here today will certainly not be a media review. It is going to be a new budget. They are going to bring to us a new budget that will propel their election success. In quote.
Wasn't that expected, especially after everything COVID-19 has done to all the economic projections?
COVID-19?
Reduced revenues, the tune of 7 billion Ghana cedis plus.
We are going to see that. This is an administration that is going to hide behind COVID-19 and engage in over-expenditure. And I'll prove that when they bring it. From all indications, that's what they're going to do. Expect a fiscal deficit in excess of 10%. It's going to be between 11 and probably by the end of the year, we'll be talking about 13% or 15% fiscal deficit. The implication will be that our debt levels are going to be so high and future generations are going to pay for it through taxation.
But wasn't that unavoidable to the extent that the economy went on a lockdown, revenue is not coming through the port, international investment is not coming because of the closure of the borders? You need to do extra expenditure when it comes to dealing with COVID-19. Isn't that expected that then you would have to borrow and your debt level to...
That is why I was expecting them to show us COVID-19 direct expenditures related to COVID-19. Segregate that out of expenditures outside COVID-19. What they've done is that even expenditures that were not in the previous budget, in the actual budget that was read, they've now found a way to sneak it into the media. And we'll see that, obviously, for the purposes of election. So what I will ask you is, just hold on. He can decide to write the whole story once again. We have all the patience in the world to wait for him. Today, we expect the media review. And after that, the coming days, we will actually subject it to proper scrutiny. And Ghanaians will know what indeed they have presented.
So your fear is that they are going to announce expenditures beyond the country's capacity to contain, going into the 2020 election, just as a way to buy off people.
Just to win elections. So this is not going to be a media review. It is going to be election 2020 review budget. That is what it is. And the purpose is to find a nice way to buy the population and get them to vote for them.
Many thanks for speaking to us. We will see how things pan out eventually, even as we wait for the Minister of Finance and for the answer. That's Cassiel Ato Forson, who is actually the minorities ranking member on the Finance Committee.
Is he gone? Is he gone, Joseph?
No, he's still right here with us,
okay.
Roland.
Yeah.
He's still right here with us.
Because there are a number of questions I thought should occupy our minds, because we do know that when we had all these difficulties, the crude oil prices were pegged at certain numbers on the international market, but currently we're having some difficulties. At the time that we had this budget, which was consistent, we had $62 being the price for Brent crude. As at the time that we had the announcement made, by the close of March, it was around some $22, hinging the market by way of what our earnings would have been as well internationally from our oil fields, and what our earnings also from petroleum would have been. That also means that definitely government's receipts or revenue would be affected. And as a former finance minister, you should be able to factor all these in to know which sectors we're going to get our revenues from, whether it's domestic revenue mobilization that's going to be affected, and also receipts internationally. And I'm thinking that should also influence his argument. Is that not it?
Okay. Let me explain. Yes, you raised some important points, but you agree with me that the oil revenues that are actually coming to the budget through the annual budget funding amount, ABFA, are actually earmarked and targeted towards certain expenditure directly in the budget.
Definitely.
So clearly, if these revenues are not coming in, what government does across the world is, one, you look at reprioritizing some of these expenditures. You don't just go into borrowing and borrow and just do it because elections are coming. You reprioritize those that you can cut. If they are capital, you cut. And then wait for better days ahead, and then actually engage in those expenditures. You don't actually go ahead because the revenues are not coming, and so you go out there to borrow. That's what every country does. And we expect them to do the same. Even apart from that, you don't end up bringing additional expenditures that are not in the original ABFA targeted expenditure and then spend on it.
But what should he be cutting that he's not going to help to cut already?
You see, obviously, when you find yourself in a situation like that, the first thing you look out for is you look out for you do prioritization of expenditure. You can look at the capital expenditure in particular.
So they should break maybe on the good construction or
it depends. Some of them. You see,
and the people will be the worst for it. If the road in your home constituency is not constructed, which the roads we should consider a priority before today.
Let us not be simplistic on the matter. Let us consider the impact on the economy if you go ahead and then borrow to the brim, to the levels that countries that become unsustainable. The impact on inflation, the impact on future taxes, the impact on debt sustainability, and everything else in the economy. So let me tell you something. Yes, you can forgo expenditures relating to the road because the revenues on that one are not actually coming. The revenues that you use to target are not coming. And say that you're going to do it this year when the oil prices pick down. When you do that, you have actually forgone road, but you have saved the economy. In the sense that if you had gone out there to borrow, one, you are going to spend so much money to service the debt that you don't have. So in future, it's going to affect economic growth. Because monies that you could have used to build the economy, you end up using it to servicing debt because of what you think is right today. So we shouldn't be simplistic about the matter and just be looking at today. We should look forward, and that is where the problem is. I am urging this administration that they should just not look at the year 2020 election. It's not all. You should look beyond that. Think about the country. Think about the people. But they have so much focus on the economy, on the elections, and they don't just want to do anything to make the economy.
Mr. Forson.
Right. That from 2021,
Mr. Ato Forson.
would start suffering some setbacks as a result of what they are doing today. That is my worry. A big worry.
And then they'll say they'll fix it after that.
Fix what?
Beyond 2021.
Just take a mess and fix it when they are not there. Then these should come and fix their mess. We are not ready.
Yeah, sure they won't be.
Because clearly, what they are doing, they just want to mess up the economy. Because they know they are losing. So they just want to mess the economy for the next administration to come and fix the thing. And then fix
Roland, I hope the Honorable Ato Forson answered your questions as he has talked.
Well, he did make his point, but it's important that we make it clear that in November, when the finance minister did not know that coronavirus will happen, we did know that definitely we needed about 67 billion to be able to use to cater for the expenditures or the appropriations for the financial year. And then in March, he had to come back to the House and make some adjustments. We adjusted to about 2% based on what the growth targets are. And based on those projections, even the World Bank says that, look, we need to go downward further to about 1% and then 1.5%. And that's the reality that faces the government, is that not it? But, you know, well, there are issues that we can speak at length to, and then with some great inquisitions based on the figures that we have.
Exactly. Kind of debates that can continue till the kingdom come, if you could possibly put it so. But in order just to get a response to some of the concerns Cassiel Ato Forson raised, let's get an MP on the NPP side. Issa Hussaini is the NPP MP for Kaikui North. He is also a member of Parliament Finance Committee. He's joining us here for a quick conversation. So we've just been speaking to Cassiel Ato Forson, the ranking member on the committee you serve on, and he thinks the government has overborrowed in the name of dealing with COVID-19, and it's taking the country to a level where the debt levels will not be sustainable. And in fact, to quote him, he thinks the economy will crash in the months ahead unless something drastic is done. Do you agree with his content?
I think that the whole world is recovering from this pandemic, and this has shown in all economies around the world. Of what use a country that has no people? I mean, if there are no people, then what are we building? We are building for people. This emergency situation calls that we put all our energies to the wheel to ensure that people are alive first before anything else could happen. If it so happens that we are going to those levels of saving lives, I think it's worth it. Like the president said, unless we know how to bring an economy back, but we don't know how to bring people alive back from death. So it's something we are doing, and we are not doing this in isolation. If you look at economic indices around the world, the U.S., for instance, is running a deficit of about 20% this year. If you look at the Euro zone, if you look at the sub-region, all economic indices are out of gear. People, the economists or the governments will have to ensure that the people are alive first, and then they can build the economy. It's true we have borrowed, but if we didn't borrow, probably our kids will not be in school. We wouldn't have done the lockdown. And if we didn't do the lockdown, only God knew what was going to happen. In November, when we did our current budget, nobody envisaged this. Not until about March that we were faced with this thing. So it meant that in the exigencies of the times, we required that we did certain things which were drastic. We set out to do things like the Fiscal Responsibility Act, which set a ceiling to our deficit. But in the face of the current challenge, we had no option than to come back to Parliament to revise all of that. So it's normal that people, governments around the world will ensure that their people are alive, and then they can build the economy.
People make the argument that expenditures could have been cut. If a road needs to be done, and these are not good times for it, it could have been shifted to the year after, so that then you can keep an economy that would have the capacity to contain all of this going into it, so that then resources could then have been diverted from the COVID-19 than to go for loans, which we would have to pay back probably at exorbitant interest rate.
We have to do a lot of things at the same time. Currently, the virus is still with us. our numbers are not looking too good. Infections are going up. At the same time, we are planning post-COVID. We are planning on how to get our companies back. Look at our tourism and our hospitality sector. It's almost collapsed. It's time that we ensure that all those facilities are so very reachable, either by road construction or something. We still have to put money in the system for people to spend. So we have that multiply effect in there. So we can't say that we're stopping everything and then after COVID before we start planning post-COVID. Whilst we are managing the virus infections and all, we should also be planning on how to get back to normal. So we have to do a lot of things at the same time.
My final question will be, Mr. Ato Forson again says this is a review, which will not exactly be a review, but virtually a rewriting of the 2021 budget. And he says he foresees specific policies that will be aimed at buying votes going into the 2020 election, which is why he's worried that we won't see anything good out of today's exercise.
That is his interpretation of it, but I'll call that we need stimulus interventions to be able to stimulate the economy. Remember, it's only by people spending. That's how economies grow. When people spend and they require services, they require goods, that's how come production, everything goes up. So if you put stimulus into the system, and he is saying that vote buying, that's his interpretation. But I want to call it stimulus. And government and economists around the world are putting stimulus packages. And that is very crucial at this time. If we don't do that, we won't get our productive sectors back on track. So that's his interpretation, but I call it stimulus.
Finally, what are we still waiting for? They should have started at 10 o'clock.
The minister will be here at 12. I'm not too sure what is happening, but I even hear that he's in the precincts of Parliament. So in the next couple of minutes, I'm sure we should get into the chamber.
Here, the majority caucus has been meeting today. Is it about a strategy, to push whatever he will request for, regardless of the concerns the minority is raising even ahead?
It is not out of place for us as a party to be meeting every now and again to strategizing on important happenings like this one. So it's very normal for us to meet this morning. Right.
Many thanks, Issa. Yes. So thank you. Thank you. Issa Forson is the Member of Parliament for Kankwe North. He's also a member of Parliament Finance Committee. Speaking to us there, even as Kano-Foriata prepares to address the House.
Well, thank you very much. Joseph Opoku-Gakpo in Parliament is our lead correspondent, going to give us all the updates. And the video just, or the feed just beside me, or you're seeing on your screens, is the live feed from the Chamber of Parliament. And based on what the directives are from the Speaker, we have the social distancing protocols going to be observed strictly. The expectation is that anytime soon, we will have the Finance Minister, Kano-Foriata, walking into the chamber and do what we all know he is expected to do, the mid-year budget review. Joseph Opoku-Gakpo also tells us that as part of the itinerary that they have, that has been announced and also well circulated among members in Parliament, he's also supposed to put forward a supplementary budget, and that would be before the House for approval. And as has been the norm over the period, Mr. Boateng, it means that we will need more as it is. Look, when the Finance Minister went for all these packages, the World Bank had promised that they'll give us a package. At the time that the President made that announcement of $100 million as it is, we hadn't drawn down any at all, but it was some allocations he thought could be put forward before the Finance Minister went to Parliament to do the needful, tell them this is the plan, we have an emergency force. This is what we need to do to salvage our economy. So far, it looks like there seems to be a disagreement on the other side, that's the minority side of Parliament, about this sort of expenditure, because they feel that's an opportunity that could mean that we're going to go beyond the Fiscal Responsibility Act of that 5% that is inherent in that act.
Yes. And these kind of conversations are not new. If you follow political, economic discussions in a lot of countries. These are not new. You have various from another group that talks about fiscal responsibility, talking about let's not spend what we don't have. Then you also have another view that says that let's spend, and then when you kick in the economy for it to grow, then you think about the fiscal responsibilities. And it will interest you to know that when Angela Merkel was asked, that you are spending and you are looking, are you not looking at deficit? They said, I don't care about deficit. I care about the economy. I will spend to grow the economy. So these are various two schools of thought when it comes to economics, and so I'm not surprised that you see parties on the each side of the divide having this discussion. But I think from where we sit, I think these are some of the discussions that, and the reasons that need to be given. As we all sit here and listen to what the finance minister is going to say, what's going to present, the review that he's going to make, we expect that some of these reasons, will come out so that it will allay the fears, if any, of Ghanaians and explain to them why it is so that people can make informed decisions. But these are not surprising. These are not new kind of discussions. It goes on everywhere. There are some people call them fiscal hawks. They're looking at GDP. They're looking at inflation. They're looking at deficit. Then there are some who are looking at growth of employment. How do we make sure that people are growing? We don't care about those numbers. Let the people grow, let the economy grow, then later on we can think about it. So those discussions are not new to Ghana, but I think the most important thing is that whenever those discussions are being made, we try to make sure that we are transparent and we make the average Ghanaian appreciate whatever divide that we're coming from. So at least we can make
by close of 2019, our debt to GDP ratio was about 64%.
Yes.
By the second quarter, Moody's had indicated that they expect that by close of the year, because of the impact we're having with coronavirus, we'll hit around the 70% ratio mark. And we're borrowing to that level. But we're a third world country. It's not too good, is it?
It depends. And I think it comes back to the point, we are not in normal times. Because if you look at the trend, these numbers, GDP to debt to GDP growth ratio and all those things, from about 8 years ago, you could see it's been a discussion and you could see it was coming down. Then the COVID is coming in. That's when fiscal responsibilities was on the go. Let's make sure we have the GDP, debt to all those ratios in place. But now things are not normal. Now those decisions have been thrown out of the window. Not for any reason, but just to make sure that what's your objective? Do I need to grow the economy? And then when later on the economy is done, I can think about those things. But I think the bottom line is what we call targeted and strategic investments or spending. Because certain spending will have positive impact on the economy. Certain spending may not have impact. And I think these are things that, decisions that we need to make whenever we're having those decisions. And I think that is what should drive those discussions. Because I can tell you for a fact that this is for no reason why America would decide to give 1,300 tax refund to taxpayers. Because they need those people to spend the money to spare the economy. It is for no reason why when mortgages were being crashed in the US, the government decided to just take over some of these assets and then make sure that people can stay and have those, because it has a multiplier effect. But these are all economic issues, and it has also a political aspects, and you all have to make sure that whenever we are making those the points, make sure all those are clear.
As we try and wrap up, we all do know that it's an election year. Capital expenditure definitely would not have to hit the rafters.
Yes.
But the concern from the minority side of the House is that coronavirus has provided a leeway for us to hit the roofs. We have a fiscal responsibility at 5% as it is, but now we're just likely to go above board.
Okay. I mean, if you look at the Fiscal Responsibility Act, I mean, that is a financial management act. So it gives a room where whenever there are certain conditions, you can just put those conditions, those laws aside, which gives the minister the wiggle room to make certain decisions. So I'm not an expert in that area. I know I read the law. That's what it says. However, as an average economist, average Ghanaian who understand the fact that whenever you are putting up all this infrastructure, capital investment, be it digital infrastructure, be it things that will spur the economy in the long run, these things, whenever you're making those decisions, as I said, there could be various schools of thoughts whether you should do it or you shouldn't do it. But we should all be guided by transparency, making sure that people are convinced. Because as we mentioned, we're talking about digitization, we're talking about those things. It's not for fun. It comes with a lot of money. But how do you convince people to do it? So these are things that we need to learn. Even though we were talking about we are in an election year, we don't want to overspend and all those things. What is the impact? And what in this particular issue? Are we looking at fiscal issues to make sure that our numbers are good or to make sure that people have jobs? These are all discussions that we all need to make. Yeah.
Well, we'll see how it goes. And thank you very much. And we also had an early discussion with Michael Boateng on many of the ramifications of the decisions that needed to be taken going forward and its impact on the economy, especially at the micro level. And Michael Boateng is a senior tax manager with KPMG, and thank you for joining us as well. Also,
thank you very much.
We had on stream Eric Asari, who works with Ivan Sassari, who works with KPMG as well, and then Dr. Lord Mensah, who also helped us with many of the discussions when it comes to the financial side and the decisions that needed to be taken by the finance minister to get us to where we want to be going forward for at least the next 2 quarters, for which we've already begun the 3rd quarter. We have to take a break, but not before we leave you with this. Joseph Opoku-Gakpo spoke to the Member of Parliament for Adaklu, who is also a ranking on Parliament's Committee on Roads and Transport. And Mr. Agboja had a lot to say.
First of all, yes, it's constitutional that the finance minister comes to the House to provide details of expenditure so far, halfway down the year. So he's not doing anything different from that. What's my expectation? Well, he's got a style. He'll probably come and read few Bible quotations, which he doesn't even believe in himself, talk about his birth, if possible, which he does all the time, but fail to address the issues that matter to the people of this country. That, for instance, the country, Parliament gave the minister 1.2 billion Ghana cedi out of the stabilization fund. IMF World Bank gave them $1 billion, working out to be about 6 billion Ghana cedi. We are told the Bank of Ghana said they will bail them out for another 10 billion. In effect, this finance minister would have 17.2 billion Ghana cedi in the shortest possible time, in less than 2 months. No government has ever had that. We are not even talking about the borrowings that he's done prior to that and the ones we are going to do, including today and others.
But these are not normal times, right? So those kinds of borrowings are virtually justified to a very large extent, aren't they?
Not at all. When you are given 17.2 billion Ghana cedi, and what did you do with it? And first of all, you remember when they came to the House, they failed to tell us what they were going to do with it. When we asked them, they only talked about they were going to pay some electricity bill and water bill, and also feed people who were in the lockdown area for 3 months. We know the lockdown wasn't even 1 month. 2, we know that, for instance, they said they were going to pay some frontline workers. As of 2 weeks ago, when the deputy finance minister was in the House, and I asked a simple question: what was your definition of a frontline worker? As of the time you made a promise, he couldn't. The speaker ruled me out, and we are told that this week they are paying part of that money. But this money is set aside.
Well, the deputy health minister has defined that 6,000 of them have been identified. People who are working directly on tested and positively confirmed COVID-19 cases, and they've paid that of the month of April already. Dr. Koboy told us that just about 3 days ago here in Parliament.
Yes. I'm saying that when the finance minister was here to answer a question about that, he couldn't answer the question. Dr. Koboy only provided some answers last week, and I'm saying that they said they were going to pay right from, look, there's some nurses and doctors who have passed on who will never know this money has been paid. Is that not the case? Because the time they said they will pay this money, they didn't pay. That is the point I'm trying to make. So if you take the commitment they made in terms of what they told Ghana they were going to use the 17.2 billion for, it's a fraction of what they actually are using the money for. And I'm saying that when you put all this, if you aggregate all these things, it is difficult to comprehend how, for instance, I am sure everybody in this country, including Joy Multimedia, The way this finance minister has managed the economy affects you. We've heard of redundancies even in the media. If this economy was buoyant enough, multimedia should be buoyant. The buoyancy of the economy is seen in the number of people gainfully employed. Today, there are drivers struggling. Why? Because Dr. Baumia and the government decided to increase the taxes on petroleum product. Let me explain. Not because the price of petroleum product have increased on the world market, but because he wanted to take the monies he's claiming to give us and for water and electricity, he wanted to take it from the back door. He increased it. Two, because of the bad nature of which he's been managing the economy, which even happened before COVID, the cedi is taking a battering from the international trading currencies. Because of that, a driver needed to pay more to get spare parts today. Because of COVID, a driver can't take a full load in his vehicle because of social distancing. I can't blame government for that. We all need to do that to feel safe. But there are three major attacks on a driver today that makes his business not worth enough, doing. But guess what? Instead of supporting the drivers with part of the 17.2 billion, you were in this house when we decided to give part of, for instance, monies to support people who shouldn't be supported. I give you an example. Today they are scheming to sell Ghana Airport, Terminal 3 and others. I'm happy that your media, some of your colleagues have been doing very detailed work, and I commend you for that. Why do I say this? Terminal 3 was built at $250 million. Part of that money that we used to build it came from the, infrastructure fund. Yeah. There was money in that fund to continue paying them. But guess what? This house decided to give that money to the relative of the president to build Pullman Hotel.
Which you think is out of place. So just to get back to the very basics, you expect the finance minister to address basic bread and butter issues in terms of what is being done for the ordinary driver, for the ordinary taxi driver, for the everyday person, for the healthcare worker, and then for the media. Yes. We know that 600 million Ghana cedis went into a stimulus package, which was aimed at helping small-scale businesses and all. So your expectation is that what? An additional package possibly be announced today, targeting those who haven't benefited from
600 million. Do you know how many, can you point to 1, 2, 3 businesses that have benefited from that so far? Do you have any evidence of those who have benefited from the 600 million?
Do you know them?
Yes, some of them we are told in Madaklu. We are told that some people are being given 2,000 cedis as a business to support their businesses. We would find out whether those people actually own businesses. We will give any support to business. In this house, the minority leader, when they came for that, the 600 million, we asked for details for who will benefit. If we were to be given the opportunity as a minority spokesperson on road and transport, I would have demanded that a driver who is an essential service provider is cushioned out of that. The trotro driver from Adenta to Tema Station, who says he's not an essential service provider? If those trotro taxis stop working today, perhaps there are people in parliament who wouldn't come to work. So we would have demanded those happen. But guess what? They decided to lump and skew those resources to other people which will go into details. I'm saying that the summary is that the finance minister will come and do the usual thing, do the praise singing, be pious, and never address the issue of when the driver will get some relief, when the people who have lost their job as a result of the bungled and targeted collapse of the banks, where today Dr. Ndum, an indigenous banker, Dr. Dufour, who built banks in this country, makes profit, who can actually employ people, are watching you and I on telly instead of being at in their banks, creating jobs and other things, simply because the president and his family want to create a system where the state is captured in every sector for them alone. Today, I am sure maybe Enterprise will be the only insurance company that will make real profit. What about other insurance companies? Those are the things that Ghanaians want answers to. And he's never going to be able to talk about those things in the chamber.
Let's round up on the bit about year of roads. We are halfway through that year of roads. Yeah. You are ranking on the Roads and Transport Committee. Has anything changed over the last 6-7 months? Any major expectations, even as the minister presents the figures on those and what the plans are for the year of roads going into the end of the year?
First of all, thank you very much. I can tell you for a fact that Ghana's roads have never been this bad in generations. Why? Because the government made a policy when they came into government in 2017 to suspend almost all road projects, claiming they were doing auditing. Out of that, Cocoa Road particularly suffered. The president was in this house enjoying one of his State of the Nation address and boasted that he supported that move. I am urging multimedia go and fish out the report of the audit on the cocoa roads. They told you some of the road didn't exist, some of the contracts were inflated. Multimedia is a powerful organization. Why are you not able to get us the report of the cocoa road audit report? Because the government lied, and I'm telling you, be bold. Go to the cocoa road board chief executive and demand that. Secondly, the government failed to put in the necessary investment into the road sector right from 2017. They only began to show interest in that from 2018, end of 2018. And indeed, they've come to this house to take some loans and to do like asphaltic overlay in Kumasi and Accra. But, Joseph, under the NDC, asphaltic overlay was happening in every regional.
Our colleague Joseph Ohuku Gakpo interacting with Mr. Kwame Abuja, Honorable Member of Parliament.